Hey there, everybody. Here we are for another installment into the Anatomy and Physiology series, and we are going to discuss part one of the nervous system today. So let's go ahead and just get right into that. Okay, this is probably one of the more challenging, I guess you could say, body systems rather, to really grasp and understand for most students, for most everybody, really. So we will get into it. I will try to explain it as simply as possible, and allow ease of understanding, so to speak. So let's go ahead and get started here. Okay, so the nervous system controls, regulates, communicates with the rest of the body. Granted, the nervous system really is only contained in or includes the brain and the spinal cord, but it does all of these things, control, regulating, communicating with the entire body. This is also where all mental activity takes place. And again, it's composed of simply the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves that are associated with that, which I say simply, but it's not as simple as one would think. All right. So the functions, specific functions, are sensory functions first. Sensory meaning things like touch and sight and smell and all of that good stuff. So in the sensory realm, what happens is basically the nervous system gathers all the input from all the outside stimuli. So that can be, temperature change or a smell or something you hear. And it converts that input into nerve impulses, and then it transmits those impulses to the brain. Um, in while it is in the brain, the integrative function kicks in, which is basically the brain making decisions based on that input that it just received. So, for instance, um, you put your hand on a hot surface. Okay. That stimuli gets converted into nerve impulses and goes straight to the brain. The brain integratively then goes, oh God, that's hot. Okay. And then the motor function kicks in, which is the response to the input and the integration, and basically sending signals back to whatever effector it was, whatever sent the impulse in the first place, to tell it what to do. So in the case of putting the hand on the hot surface, your brain's going to go, oh God, that's hot. You're going to burn, move it away. And those signals go back to, in this case, your skeletal muscles that are controlling your hand and your arm, and you move. Okay. So that is basically sensory, integrative, and motor functions. The nervous system is organized or divided, so to speak, into two main systems: the central nervous system, or the CNS, and the peripheral nervous system, or the PNS. So the central nervous system, as you see right here, is literally just the brain and the spinal cord. Okay. The nerves that obviously come off of them. The peripheral nervous system is everything else. Okay. So brain and spinal cord is the central, and then the peripheral nervous system, the PNS, is literally every other nerve that is associated with that. So nervous tissue. Okay. Nerves are cells, just like everything else in our body is a cell, right? There are certain types of cells, though. There's the neuron, which is probably gets the most, celebrity of the cells in the nervous system. That is your nerve cell. That is what transmits impulses. Okay. Then there's also what's called the neuroglia. Neuroglia doesn't conduct anything. It is there literally just to support the neurons. So it's the backup, the support, the hey, buddy, you're doing a good job, okay? And other things too, but basic support. If you've made it this far and you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please, please do. Also click that like button. It really helps out. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. And it helps me to continue to be able to make these videos and help all of you out. All right. So neurons, nerve cells. Like I said, they get the most celebrity of the bunch. They are made up of a few things. First, the cell body, which is the main part of the neuron. This is where the nucleus is. And remember, I said that, it's a cell. So it's got a nucleus just like most other cells do that controls it. It is also then made up of dendrites, which are basically little finger extensions that come off of the nerve body. They're usually short and branching. They are what transmits impulses to the cell body. And then there is a single axon, which is an extension that is a little more elongated in most nerve cells or most neurons. And that carries impulses away from the cell body. So the dendrites basically receive the impulses that come in and send them to the body, the middle of the cell. And then the axon, anything that would have to leave the cell body, any impulse that would have to leave the cell body, gets carried away from it by the axon. And let us take a quick look at what that looks like. So this is a drawing, obviously, but so here's your nucleus. This then being the cell body. Okay. These little short branchy guys are your dendrites. Okay, so any impulses that are coming in from other neurons, which is generally how that happens, neuron to neuron, are coming in through these dendrites and being taken into the hub, so to speak, the cell body. This long guy here is the axon. And so any impulses that need to be carried away from the cell body to go to another cell, another neuron, another organ, wherever it's going, would be carried away from that cell body through this axon. This has a couple of other things here, and here's where the axon terminates down here. This is a myelin sheath, which is basically just fatty tissue that's insulated. We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And then these little areas in between are called the nodes of Ranvier. And those are just non-myelinated pieces of the axon in between the myelinated areas. And we will get to that here in a moment. All right, so here's other neuron structures, and here's what I was talking about. So we have the axon collateral, which are any side branches of an axon. Some nerve cells do have those. The short branches at the end of the axon are called the telodendria. The synaptic knob is the enlargement at the end of the telodendria. So let's go back here real quick and I'll show you. These would be the telodendria. These would be the knobs. Okay. Myelin, which are those little purple things that I said were fatty substances, those surround the nerve fibers. They insulate, so to speak. The regions in between the myelin are called nodes of Ranvier. And then you have neurolema and oligodendrocytes. Neurolema produces myelin in the peripheral nervous system. So any of the nerves that are associated with the PNS, the neurolema is producing the myelin for those. And then any nerves that are associated with the CNS or the central nervous system, the oligodendrocytes are producing the myelin for those. And those are just cells that produce. As far as classification of neurons go, you have afferent and efferent, and then interneurons. So afferent, and if you have been with me through this journey of anatomy and physiology, you probably recognize the terms afferent and efferent. They come up a lot in a lot of our A&P. Most notably, and I think most recently, I did a urinary video, and we talk about efferent and afferent um, areas of the kidney. Okay. All afferent and efferent means is away from and towards. Okay. So afferent in this case, in the nervous system case, are the sensory um, classifications that carry the impulses from the peripheral receptors to the central nervous system. Okay. So afferent neurons carry impulses from the peripheral to the central nervous system. These can be recognized because they have longer dendrites and shorter axons. Okay. Efferent, or the motor neurons, carry impulses from the CNS to the various organs and glands and whatever. So they carry them away from the central nervous system. So afferent brings impulses in to the central nervous system. Efferent carries them away from them, and again can be noted as looking a little different in they have shorter dendrites and longer axons. So more so the drawing I showed you would be an efferent if you had to guess. Association neurons, or what are called interneurons, form the links between these two. Um, and they have short dendrites for sure, but can have long or short axons. But they're basically kind of the go-between. Okay. All right, so starting with the central nervous system, to divide these and explain them, we have the brain. The brain, of course, is enclosed in the cranium, or the skull, as we call it. Cranium being the top part, the skull being the whole thing, but it's enclosed in the cranium for protection. The spinal cord also enclosed by the vertebral column for protection. Neuron cells and unmyelinated fibers make up the gray matter in the central nervous system. And then the myelinated fibers make up the white matter because they're a little more fatty. Okay. Then we have the meninges. The membranes that surround the brain and the spinal cord are referred to as meninges. Um, they're there also for protection. There are three layers, excuse me. There's the dura mater, the arachnoid layer, and the pia mater. Dura is the outer layer. That's right here. So here you have your skull. Okay, this is just a little piece of the brain. Here you have the skull. Just underneath that's the dura. Then you have the arachnoid, and then the pia. Oh, I am so sorry, just clicked. The pia, and then you have the brain. Okay. The dura is the outer layer. It's tough, it's fibrous, makes sense if it's trying to protect and kind of hug the brain, so to speak. The arachnoid is the middle layer, it's a little thinner, and the pia is the inner layer, and it is even more thin. The arachnoid, I will say, is called that because it looks like spider webs. It's kind of stringy, so to speak. Okay. Um, let me go back real quick. Duly noted, though, if you've ever heard the term meningitis as being a disorder, well, an illness, that is what it's referring to is the inflammation of these areas here, of these membranes. Okay, it's very, very dangerous. Okay, the cerebrum is the largest part of the brain. That is this part right here. Okay. It is divided into two hemispheres. So there's a division. You can't see it from the side. It goes right down the center of the brain. And there are some white fibers that connect those two halves called the corpus callosum. Okay. Also in as part of the brain, you have the gyri and the sulci. The gyri are convolutions, so little bumps. If you've ever seen a drawing of a brain or an actual brain, it's bumpy, right? The gyri is the bumps, and then the sulci are the little grooves in between those bumps. So basically, it's like the peaks and the valleys, okay, of the brain. You also have lobes of the brain. There is the frontal lobe, which is right here. You have the parietal lobe, which is right here. You have the occipital lobe, which is all the way in the back here. And then the temporal lobe, which is right here. Okay. All right. And here's a drawing, so better. And this is talking more so about the cerebral cortex, which is the outer portion of the cerebrum. It's made up of gray matter. It contains both sensory functions and motor functions, primarily functions of both for memory, language, reasoning, intelligence, personality. And you can see that here on this diagram where it not only shows the lobes, so here again, your frontal, temporal, parietal, and occipital. But it shows the various areas of the cerebrum that are responsible for different things, so to speak. So, personality, right up front here, speech, movement, sensation. Here's your language area, vision, hearing, and smell. Um, as an example, and kind of to be noted, you see the occipital lobe here is talks about being responsible for vision or the center of vision. If you've ever gotten hit in the back of the head real hard and you kind of, they say see stars, that's why. Because that can mess up your vision. If you have ever heard of a procedure that they term a frontal lobotomy, I don't know that honestly, I don't know that they even do these anymore. I'm sure maybe in really, really extreme, dire situations. But it used to be quite common practice 60, 70, 80 years ago, um, where they would go in for people who had really severe mental illness. They would go in and remove part of the frontal lobe, because notice that is where personality lives, to try and quelch that illness. And oftentimes it just made people kind of like zombies. Um, there's a movie, not obviously not promoting anything, but there is a movie that's out many decades ago called One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And it talks about a gentleman that had a frontal lobotomy. So if you've never seen that movie, it's not a bad movie to watch. But again, not promoting the movie, not promoting the movie, just mentioning it. All right, and then in the center of our brain, we have what is called the diencephalon. The diencephalon is where the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus live. Okay, so you have the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. The thalamus is the area that sends sensory impulses to the correct area of the brain to be interpreted. So the thalamus is kind of like I don't know, the traffic director, right? Um, the hypothalamus is connected with regulation of a lot of things. Emotional responses, body temperature, food intake, water balances, sleep-wake cycles, and is also connected by this little stalk right here called the infundibulum to this gland, which is the pituitary gland, which is then responsible for secretion of hormones. So the hypothalamus actually regulates the pituitary gland. And if you've seen my endocrinology or endocrine system video, you know exactly what the pituitary gland does. And then the epithalamus, of course, is where the pineal gland extends from. And the pineal gland deals with other aspects as well, like balance and things like that. Okay, so then we have the brain stem. Okay, and the brain stem is right here. The brain stem includes the superior portion, which is the midbrain, the pons, which is this area, or I'm sorry, this area right here, the belly, the middle portion. And then this area is called the medulla oblongata. Okay. Um, the medulla oblongata is probably, I don't want to say the most important because they're all important. However, that is where your ascending and descending nerves that connect the brain to the spinal cord reside. And this is also where a big portion of your centers are: cardiac center, respiratory center, vasomotor center, really kind of controls and regulates a lot of those things. Okay, the second largest portion of the brain is the cerebellum. That is right here. And you can see in relation to, so this is the cerebrum. Here is your diencephalon area. Here is your brain stem, and then the cerebellum resides right here. It is the second largest portion of the brain. It's made up of white matter and helps to function with also with coordination, posture, balance, things like that. Okay, moving onward then to the spinal cord. The spinal cord extends from the base of the skull because it is connected to the brain stem. Let's go back. Brain stem and then spinal cord. So the skull is right here. There's a hole in the bottom of the skull called the foramen magnum. Anytime you hear the term foramen, it just means a hole, and magnum because it's a very large hole. That's where the spinal cord extends down through. It is surrounded by bone, meninges, and cerebrospinal fluid. There are 31 pairs of nerves that extend laterally from it. Basically, white matter surrounds gray matter in the makeup of this. And as you notice, the gray matter, this of course is stained. It's not really purple. This is just stained so you can see it. And this is a cross section, of course. Here's the gray matter. Here's the white matter. The gray matter kind of ends up looking like an H, or again, here I go. If you if you listened to my endocrine system, looks like a video game controller to me. Um, just is what it is. And each side of the gray matter then is also then divided into horns, or what we call roots. Okay. All right, so moving onward to the peripheral nervous system. These are nerves that branch from the brain and the spinal cord. There is a couple of subdivisions. The somatic nervous system, which is the nerves of the skin and the muscles. These all are involved in voluntary activities. The autonomic nervous system is the nerves of more of the visceral organs, and those are involved then in involuntary activities. And we will talk a little bit more about the autonomic nervous system because it is then further subdivided in part 2 of this video. All right, so thank you so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate everybody who takes the time to watch my videos. I hope that they're helping you. We will see you, of course, for part 2. And until then, take care of yourself and have a great day.